وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين، وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد في كل وقت وحين، وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد في المال الأعلى إلى يوم الدين، وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد حتى ترث الأرض ومن عليها أنت خير الوارثين. نويت تعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتذكير ونفع انتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم، ودعاء إلى الهدى ودلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. Inshallah ta'ala, the continuation of our reading of the work of Imam al-Tirmidhi, yani rahimahullah ta'ala, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yusahih niyatina, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes our intention sound, and always, quote unquote, the nature of a sound intention is when one desires a taqarrub ila Allah ta'ala, as one desires to be proximate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this August month, inshallah ta'ala, proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself has decreed subhanahu wa ta'ala, is by virtue of proximity to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And the proximity to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ultimately is found in ittiba', in a radical adherence to the example that He set subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is the exemplar. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, that for you in the Messenger of God you have the best example. It's like in gatherings here, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed us of proximity, for instance, in terms of taqarrub, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distributes inside of deeds, gatherings, for instance, His mercy subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala embraces and encompasses all good. And so, for instance, when we go to prayer as an example, where does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distribute His mercy subhanahu wa ta'ala? He distributes His mercy first and foremost at the Imam. And so the basis there for somebody who's sound in intent in going to prayer, that the closer they get to the Imam, the better. Remember the Prophet ﷺ said, if you knew what was inside of the first row, which is the most proximate of all rows to the Imam, you would get there even if you had to crawl on ice. The Prophet ﷺ, if you knew what Allah Ta'ala deposited therein, due to taqarrub, the proximity to what? To the epicenter of mercy distributed. And with that maqam there, ultimately we see beyond the Imam who is praying, you should be seeing the Prophet ﷺ, that's his maqam. The Imam in prayer, he stands in the maqam, in the station of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. That's why of the last prayers that we know of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, a public prayer, was the prayer inside the Sahih al-Bukhari, that although Abu Bakr, quote unquote, was the Imam, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam thereby enters and he prays in front of Abu Bakr. And as the hadith concludes, فَصَلَّى Abu Bakr bi salatin nabi wa salla an-nas bi salati Abi Bakr. He says that the Prophet, he says that Abu Bakr thereby prayed following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the congregation prayed following Abu Bakr anhu warda. But the point being is that the maqam is the maqam of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so the closer you get to quote unquote to the Imam, the closer you get to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the closer you get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, quote unquote, in terms of hilak al-ilm, hilak al-dhikr, in terms of circles of knowledge, in circles of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when the maqam is the maqam of the Nabi, and the people, the Sahaba, the first generation, Ra'iyat al-Ula, they gathered around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what the circle is. As in tradition, كَانَ يُقْبِلْ عَلَى هَؤُلَاء وَكَانَ يُقْبِلْ عَلى هَؤُلَاء. The Prophet sallallahu turning towards those, as they were. They circled around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the maqam is the maqam of the Nabi. And then a sign of sound intention is the closer you get to the one who's holding the circle, the one who's teaching the circle of Wahhabi. The closer you get, the closer you are to the Nabi, the closer you are to, because it's the first point Allah Ta'ala distributes His mercy subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who are closer, min al-rijal, from amongst the men, as we make mention of those who are closer, mashallah ta'ala, hakada they take, mashallah ta'ala, as Sayyidina Abu Hurairah rahimahullah ta'ala, and quoting the Prophet sallallahu فَقَدْ أَخَذَ بِحَبٍّ وَافِرٍ, and they've taken the lion's share, or often it's a sign of sound intent. And those who draw close, then Allah Ta'ala draws them close. As in the tradition of the Rasul sallallahu وَمَنْ أَخَّرْ, and the one who delayed, فَقَدْ أَخَّرَهُ اللَّهُ, Allah Ta'ala has delayed him. Allah Ta'ala has pushed him back. Jalla Jalaluhu wa ta'ala. It's always a sound. And a'mal bin niyat, يعني actions will clarify intentions, and they'll clarify our intentions, inshallah ta'ala. Within these circles, inshallah ta'ala, to become from the dhakirin, not from the ghafilin. Yani. We're there to become from the people who truly heed, yani, who remember, who invoke. We're not there to become from the heedless, but from the ones who heed. Hakada, quote unquote, we're inside of the circles. We continue, inshallah ta'ala, the reading of, mashallah ta'ala, of Imam al-Tirmidhi, yani, rahimahullah ta'ala. We're inside the chapter of the libas. Libasi Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, the clothes of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Remember, libas in the Arabic language, it means to obscure. It means to obscure, and to obscure or to cover something. That's the basic linguistic signification of the word libas in the Arabic language. That's why, talbis, iblis, the work of Imam Ibn Jawzi, rahimahullah ta'ala, and the deception of the devil. How the devil covers the eyes of man, and the libas in the Arabic, iltibas in the Arabic language, when something is obscure, it lacks clarity. And so here, from the word covering, like a veil. And so the libas, because clothes, they're meant to cover or to veil one's aura. Okay? And so now we look at the supreme clothes, which are the clothes of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as we made mention of, which are of a higher order. We're on the 57th tradition, 57th hadith, inshallah ta'ala, that Imam al-Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala compiles inside of his Shama'il. وبه إليه قال حدثنا عبد الله بن محمد بن الحجاج حدثنا معاذ بن هشام حدثني أبي يعني عن بوديل يعني ابن ميسرة العقيلي عن شهر ابن حوشب عن أسماء بنت يزيد قالت كان قميص رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم إلى الرسغ. And so we look at the tradition here of the great woman saying to Asma bint Yazid radiallahu anha yani wardaha, of the most knowledgeable of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Hakada, from a very blessed family of knowledge. She's the first cousin of Sayyidina Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu ta'ala anhu wardah. Sayyidina Mu'adh bin Jabal, as the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, the most knowledgeable man after the Prophet, yani Sayyidina Mu'adh bin Jabal. And this is his cousin Asma bint Yazid radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. She's known as Za'imatun Nisa. She's known as the spokeswoman. Yani, spokeswoman. And she's the spokeswoman for the Sahabiyat, for the companions, female companions who surround the Prophet ﷺ. Then she's what? The spokeswoman, mashallah ta'ala, for all women, radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. A lot of the verses inside of the book of Allah ta'ala that concern women, and particularly concern women, they come forth from the great woman, Sayyidina Asma bint Yazid. A lot of the peculiarities in the age of the Prophet ﷺ, in terms of the treatment, this peculiar treatment of the Rasul ﷺ, towards women, they come forth from this great woman, Sayyidina Asma bint Yazid, radiallahu ta'ala, anha wardah. A lot of our understandings, mashallah ta'ala, of what, of quote unquote, of zawjiyat, of women, in terms of the treatment of their husbands, from the great woman, Asma bint Yazid, radiallahu anha, wardaha. He mentions in the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, the Rasul rises from prayer, ﷺ, and then he rises and goes to the back of the mosque where the women have convened. The women have convened at the back of the mosque, behind the rijal, behind the men. And then the Prophet ﷺ commands Sayyidina Bilal to accompany him. And so the day by Sayyidina Bilal accompanies him, and then the Prophet ﷺ now is addressing the women, tasaddaqan, he said, tasaddaqan. We now begin to give in charity. So he's enjoying it when the women give it in charity. And then the Prophet ﷺ gives the reason, and again, it's a means of what, in particular, of women are protecting themselves, quote unquote, from nar al-jahim, because the Prophet ﷺ is speaking about ru'ya now, about what he's seen. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, nadartu fi nar, I gazed into hellfire. The Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِذَا أَكْثَرُهُمْ النِّسَاء, and the majority of them were women. Statement, full stop, of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فَقَالَتْ إِحْدَاهُنْ, and so one of the women, min wasatihinna, in the tradition, min wasatihinna. So she was in the midst of the women. She wasn't at the front, okay? She wasn't at the back, but she was in the midst, And again, as we made mention of, and the word wasat in the Arabic language, quote unquote, it carries also the meaning of the best. She's in the best position that she could have been in at that point in time, in front of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and representing the women. And khairul umur awsatuha. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the Bukhari, the best of all affairs are those that are awsat. So she's in the midst of the woman, and she said, lima ya Rasulullah. Okay, she's going to ask the Prophet, like, why? Okay, you've given us quote unquote what you've seen, but we want to understand the reason why. Because on the basis of the reason, as long as we remove the reason, then could we remove ourselves from hell, isn't it? But if we are those quote unquote who affirm the reason, then we just ask Allah Ta'ala for safety and security and for shafa'at al-Nabi and for the intercession of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That woman there, Asma bint Yazid, it's a great woman, Asma bint Yazid, she's the one who's going to speak up and she's going to address the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Why, O Messenger of God Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And then the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, "Kufrihinna li bu'ulatihinna." Kufrihinna li bu'ulatihinna. And their ingratitude they show to their husbands. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says. With a note, okay, before quote unquote men start getting happy in their tyrannical way inside of quote unquote the four walls of their family, and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam addressed the husbands using the Arabic language. Bu'ul. Bu'ul here is the plural of the term Ba'al. Ba'al, like saying to Sarah, yani alayhi salam, when she speaks about saying Ibrahim, yani to Jibreel and others, yani ba'ali shaykha, my Ba'al is a shaykh. So she addresses Ibrahim as being a Ba'al. She used the word Zawj, Ba'al. And Ba'al in the Arabic language, Ba'al lam, maqlub, and we flip it around, we get la'ib, playful. Okay? And so sometimes in the Arabic language, a word, yani, if you flip it around, you get a greater understanding of the word in and of itself. Sometimes in the Arabic language, a word, if you flip it around, you get the antonym, the opposite of the word. But sometimes you get actually the same meaning of the word in and of itself. And so Ba'al al-La'ib understood, as the Prophet ﷺ clarifies here, he says, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Kullu malahi batil. The Prophet ﷺ says, all sports, all forms of entertainment, all of that, batil. They're false. They have no weight with Allah Ta'ala. All Hekadari begins, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, illa. He says, except, quote unquote, the Prophet ﷺ now, he said archery, except the Prophet ﷺ, a man raising his horse, and a person raising the horse, being with horses, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, except the husband bow. Now, with the wife. The Prophet placed that for amongst, quote unquote, these realities of futuwa, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's the ba'al, the Prophet ﷺ is saying. And so the Rasul ﷺ is saying is when a woman shows ingratitude to a very good and considerate husband, not just a husband, any husband, but when she shows ingratitude, quote unquote, to a husband, in reality, she should be showing gratitude towards, not ingratitude. The Prophet ﷺ is saying. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, don't you see that he does one thing wrong? And bashar, human beings, everyone's going to make mistakes. If you didn't make a mistake, Allah Ta'ala would get rid of you. Allah Ta'ala replacing you with other types of people who did do things wrong. The Prophet ﷺ says in Sahih Bukhari, but hakada, my girl here, that her husband's going to make one mistake, and she says, "Ma ra'aytu khayran min taqat." I ain't seen good from you ever, ever. And one mistake, and she ain't seen sure. She's got into some type of spiritual amnesia right there, isn't she? Sure, like she can't remember any good, not even him marrying her. Not even that wasn't good. Yeah, sure, can't remember anything. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but you see, quote unquote, like what the Prophet is showing you there, that women, quote unquote, they have a propensity for that. And not only propensity for that, they'll embrace that because he saw it, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and rufi'at al-aqlam wa jaffat as-suhuf, pens lifted, pages have dried. It's just how do you become of those who he never saw inside of hellfire, isn't it? And so Asma bint Yazid radiallahu anha wardaha, this great woman, and mashallah, tabarakallah, and her biography filled, not only quote unquote a woman of knowledge, a woman of war, she fought in battle, Asma bint Yazid in Yarmouk, in the great battle of Sayyidina Khalid radiallahu anhu wardaha against Rome, against the might of Rome, and she fought, Asma bint Yazid, and she killed she killed nine quote unquote Romans in battle, in armed combat, saying Asma bint Yazid, and rahimahullah ta'ala. How can they say, but the companions around the Rasul, important that they were warrior scholars, warrior scholars. It's not just scholars, quote unquote, and those who just taken to knowledge, but what their knowledge, if it doesn't, quote, would manifest in that which, quote unquote, you know, and that which, quote unquote, you impart in and of itself, isn't it? It's like one of the great Imams of the Shafi'i school, his name is Abu Bakr al-Shatta. We just make mention of it because of the age in which we live in. Abu Bakr al-Shatta, radiallahu anhu, wardahu, he has a work there, what's called I'anat al-Talibin, the highest works in the Shafi'i school, is in I'ana. And Imam Abu Bakr al-Shatta, rahimahullah ta'ala, once He's there, he's teaching students, mashallah ta'ala. What chapter have they arrived at? And the Kitab al-Jihad, the book of Jihad. And so now, khalas, they end the book of Jihad, and then Sayyidina Abu Bakr al-Shattar says, now close your books. Everyone close your books. He says, now it's time to live it. And it was an age when Palestine, quote unquote, was under the Kosh likewise. And the entire circle rose. They went to jihad, they went to war inside of Palestine. That's their ilm, isn't it? That's their ilm. Impossible for you to quote unquote say that the Sahaba has knowledge of something and doesn't live it. And says Asma bint Yazid, with the knowledge that she has, which is a very, very comprehensive knowledge, you can quote unquote bet your bottom dinar if it was quote unquote permissible to bet that Asma bint Yazid radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha lived that which she taught, and she taught that which she knew radiallahu ta'ala anha wardaha. And she's teaching us now about what, mashallah ta'ala, about the actual sleeve of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of the garment that he wore sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that she says that the shade sleeve of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam extended to his blessed wrist. Extended to his blessed wrist. Like, look, shuf, Kaif, we're just saying, like, can you imagine like Abu Bakr al-Shattar there? Can you imagine everyone in all the madaris, Sharqan wa Gharb and Shima'il wa Januba, in all the madaris of Islam, people read, quote unquote, now the chapter of jihad, and the Shaykh said, close your books. We've got business to do. Can you imagine? I think the world would look rather different, isn't it? It would look very different, yeah. Very, very different. If of the reasons, like I just said, with the reasons you're going to approach a circle of knowledge with niyat salihah, with what, mashallah, with righteous intentions, taqarrub ilallahi ta'ala, to draw closer to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu wa ta'ala. How in heaven and earth, in our day and age, quote unquote, can somebody read the Kitab of Jihad whilst Palestine is taking place? And then thereby go and ask for a quote unquote an Americano or a latte or whatever, mocha. Like how in heaven and earth, yani? That don't make sense. The Ummah of the Rasul bankrupt. The Prophet ﷺ said, all that remains is niyat wal jihad. That's all that remains. In sound intentions and jihad, the Prophet ﷺ informed us. Ummah bankrupt, yani. That's why we see what unfolds. You sure? And then quote unquote, when we sit there, I'm going to call for £1 a meal. Man can't even give a pound, yani. You sure? You're going to have no hujjah in front of Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala, look what happened whilst you were alive, yani. And whilst you were alive, look exactly what happened whilst you were alive. And sure, like, what have you got, quote unquote, due to your inactivity, quote unquote, what have you got to say for yourself? You can't even start flipping up a pound. Ya Allah, like I bought a meal for somebody who's hungry in Palestine. Ya Allah, I bought 10. You can't do jack, yani. Then even, quote unquote, a meal, marhaba, you gave them a meal for the night. What about the next night? Your next time you have a meal, just make sure it's a meal for that night. Don't think about the meal the day after or the week after or the month after. Innit? Like what a meal. Alhamdulillah, calls were better than nothing, but it's very close to nothing. Don't get deluded here. Nasarallah as-salam al-afiyah. Umar of the Rasul bankrupt in our day and age, yani bankrupt. SubhanAllah. And no doubt part of the process, yani, is what is mashallah ta'ala, is going back to the circles of knowledge and embrace of knowledge. But it cannot stop there. And it's got to move beyond there pretty fast as well, like really fast. Nasarallah as-salam al-afiyah. Yani subhanallah. Now sometimes we think, yani subhanallah, of some people, and we say it, yani it is what it says. And we know people who blew themselves up inside of Palestine. We know people like that, yani. And you can argue whether it's right or wrong, but then what else? What else as the world, quote unquote, or the option that they gave people, yani, quote unquote, say that they're going to go to places and detonate, yani. You sure? And this is in no way, quote unquote, trying to corroborate that or to ratify that. But hakada, shuf, quote unquote, nasarallah as-salam al-afiyah. But then sometimes you think, what then do we do? It's not like we go there and detonate, but what we say, like, what then do we do? Yeah, we can't even buy a meal, £1, yeah. Like, and every one of us, we would have missed a pound. We wouldn't even miss £5. We wouldn't even miss 10. There's a point where you all know we wouldn't miss. And we can't even do that. And it's sure we can't even go back to the books of knowledge and to study the books of knowledge and to become people of tahqiq of knowledge. We can't even become people like, forget that. Like Asma bint Yazid radiallahu anha wardaha, يعني والعالم بعلمه لم يعملا معذبا من قبل العباد الوثن. As the Imam rahimahullah ta'ala, somebody with knowledge who does not act in accordance with his knowledge, they are punished يعني before idolaters. هكذا شوف عند حديث صحيح مسلم of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. Umar of the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم. And if it was not for the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, because remember our nisbah is to the Rasul. It's about him صلى الله عليه وسلم. The nisbah is not to the Ummah. It's to the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم. Because if it was the nisbah, if it was about our relationship with the Ummah, we'd be too ashamed to have a relationship with that type of Ummah in our day and age, isn't it? Like, who would want to be from the Ummah if it was not the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Musa alayhi salam didn't desire to be from your Ummah, yani, sure, the Ummah, quote unquote, of the 15th century. From that Ummah, we want to be from that Ummah. The Ummah of which is irrecognizable in the eyes of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The only thing we hold on to is just quote unquote that strand of hair, yani, that connects back to the supreme hair of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How can we ask Allah Ta'ala for tawfiq? But there has to come, those great sort of months, Ramadan, the great month, which is in Rabi al-Awwal. These are the months, and mashallah ta'ala, when people, mashallah ta'ala, they have quantum change. It's like the night there, better than the day. It's like quantum change. It's like the Prophet ﷺ in the Musnad of Ahmad, the Prophet ﷺ, he said the Mahdi fasiq, that the Mahdi is wicked. Allah yughayyiruhu fil layla. Allah Ta'ala changes them in a night. Didn't say changes them in the day. In a night, Allah Ta'ala flip him 180 degrees there. The Prophet ﷺ says. And so Hekad is that type of age. That's why you never give up, you never lose hope in it. Because no matter how distant you are, no matter what direction you're moving in, Allah Ta'ala, al-Mughayr al-Ahwal, al-Muqallib al-Qulub, subhanahu wa ta'ala, flip you in a minute. Okay, but there has to be, quote, quote, at least a type of intention inside of your heart to be flipped, yani. Some of them come, quote unquote, as destiny begins to unfold and the hand of the divine, subhanahu wa ta'ala, come to try and flip you 180 degrees. Many of us resisted it. Resisted being flipped by the divine, Jalla Jalaluhu wa ta'ala. Again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah Ta'ala gives us tawfiq, nadhara minhu subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala, and it gazes upon the ummah, especially as we approach this blessed night, the night in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam upon the mashur, baraz, and it manifested sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, and then the world changed forever. You get the point? Can you imagine, and shuf kayf, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look, in the hadith of Sahih Muslim, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, is that Allah Ta'ala nadhara ila al-khalq, Allah Ta'ala gazed at the entire creation, from the Prophet ﷺ, وَمَقَتَهُمْ جَمِيعًا, and the wrath of God was upon all of them, عَرَبَهُمْ وَعَجَمَهُم. He says, Arabs are not Arabs. Allah Ta'ala's wrath was upon all. But then, baraz, and the Rasul ﷺ manifested, isn't it? Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala granted us the Rasul ﷺ. But then Allah Ta'ala then addresses the Prophet ﷺ, hadith of Sahih Muslim, Ya Muhammad, inni mubtalik, and we're going to test you. Shuf the Rasul ﷺ. وَمُبْتَلِي بِكَ, and we're going to test through you. Every one of us are tested by the standard of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. هَكَذَا وَعَدَ اللَّهُ حَقًّا, that there is the promise of God in reality, the promise of God in truth. All of us tested by virtue of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. And the problem, subhanAllah, he set a standard in it. That is the problem. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam has set a standard. You can imagine, quote, in any discipline you have, any craft that you have, profession that you have, if you're going to be tested, quote unquote, when you go for your interview, according to the master of the fen, the originator of the fen, of the science in and of itself, if that was going to be the standard by which you're going to be carried, well, that's the standard by which Allah Ta'ala carries all of us, the standard of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And there were those, mashallah Ta'ala, who rose to the challenge. You with it? Remember, there was mafahim from the Sahaba in the tradition there that we see part of the reason Surah Al-Baqarah is revealed, that some of the Sahaba, that mindset of the Sahaba, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to test Yawm al-Qiyamah. Shuf. And there's the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We see the acts of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But we're not the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How can some of the minds of the Sahaba? And for amongst them, like they like to say Ali, from amongst them like to say Abu Darda, from amongst them like to say Abdullah ibn Abbas, those type of companions, he said, there's the Nabi, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah Ta'ala going to test. But we're not the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What does that mean? How can they concluded? We've got to do more than him. We've got to go further than him, yani. Sure. Can you imagine that mindset of people? Like, we've got to go more further because we're not him. Allah Ta'ala, him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We are not him. So we've got to do more, quote unquote. In reality, there's no more. The khairiyas and the Prophet will correct them. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But shuf, even that mindset is a blessed mindset. isn't it? That's why they're imams, imna kibar, radiallahu ta'ala anhum. Us, kaif? Tayyib, the sleeve, the shade sleeve of the Messenger of Allah وسلم, extended to his blessed wrist. So we know, like we ordinarily see garments, that was where what the sleeve of the actual shade of the Prophet وسلم, extended to. Although we have traditions that the actual sleeve ila ru'us al-asabi', and to the tip of his fingers, sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Hadith of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, yani karamallahu wajhu. But ordinarily, overwhelmingly, hakada ila rusugh, and to the wrist, and the sleeve of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that the Prophet also, the tradition forbade anyone's sleeves going beyond the fingertips, sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. وبه إليه قال حدثنا أبو عمار الحسين بن حريث حدثنا ابن نعيم حدثنا زهير عن عروة ابن عبد الله ابن قشير عن معاوية ابن قرة عن أبيه قال أتيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في رهط يعني من مزينة لنبايعه وإن قميصه لا مطلق وقال زر قميصه مطلق قال فادخلت يدي في جيب قميصه فمسست الخاتم. هكذا الحديث القرة يعني رضي الله تعالى عنه. He said, I came to the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم with a group from the tribe of Muzayna, so that we could pledge our allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sallam. This is like the ninth year of what, after the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which we know that year is called Am al-Wufud. It's called the year of delegations, and there were over 40 different delegations from around Arabia are going to head towards Medina to Munawwara in order ultimately, quote unquote, for the majority of them to embrace and enter into the fold of Islam. Although the basis for the majority, likewise, prior to that, is to truly see whether he is the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. The overwhelming majority embrace and accept, whereas the minority, the vast minority, are going to turn away and reject. Okay? From amongst those, mashallah ta'ala, who embrace Muzayna, the clan of the tribe of Muzayna, that Qurra radiallahu anhu wardahu, is a part of. So he comes unto the Messenger of Allah with a group and with a delegation from the tribe of Muzayna, so that we could ultimately pledge our allegiance to the Prophet because it's not just as simple as you entering into the fold of Islam. It goes further than that, doesn't it? Sure. And it's about now bay'ah. Once you enter the fold of Islam, now bay'ah to Rasul. You must give the allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And the basis of the bay'ah to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is ta'atu, is obedience to the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And that's why for some, Allah Ta'ala is not just going to take you to account for disobeying the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but also for the contradiction of what? Of your oath, your pledge of allegiance, because you made a pledge to likewise also to obey the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That even more grave with Allah Jalla Jalaluh wa ta'azamatu. His shirt was open, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, or the button of his shirt was unfastened. So that's one thing we made mention of. So now we can affirm that the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam shirt had buttons when the zirrahu la mutlaq. The zirra, the button mutlaq, was unfastened. Okay, why is it unfastened? It's for the same reason that the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will lower his shirt for the likes of Sayyidina Salman al-Farisi radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. So we get sight of what? Of the actual seal of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. But the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam here is wearing a shirt that it's not so easy, quote unquote, to lower. It's not like a rida that you can just lower it sallallahu alayhi wa sallam so that you can see the seal. And so the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam instead, he does on buttons, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. But part of that is a knowledge of what they want to see, because there are different things they want to see. Muzayna, the seal. We want a seal. And so thereby they come unto the Prophet ﷺ, the button of his shirt was unfastened. So I inserted my hand into the opening of the shirt. Look at that. He just puts his hand like that. And look how liberal the Rasul is. The Rasul not like back off, yeah. Come touch me like that before. The Rasul not like that. The Rasul allows it, sure. Goes right in, come on, mashallah, into the shirt of the Rasul. And he begins, as he says, radiallahu anhu warda, he touches the seal, the seal of Nabuwah, which is now is going to ratify this, alayhi khatam and Nabuwah. As Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajhu says, upon him is the seal of prophecy, and he is the seal of the Prophet. Hakada, they enter into the fold of Islam. Radiallahu ta'ala an. يعني وبه إليه قال حدثنا عبد يعني ابن حميد حدثنا محمد بن فضل يعني حدثنا حماد بن سلمة عن حبيب بن الشهيد عن الحسن عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج وهو يتكئ على أسامة بن زيد يعني عليه ثوب قطري قد توشح به فصلى بهم. وقال عبد بن حميد قال محمد بن الفضل سألني يحيى بن معين عن هذا الحديث أول جلس إلي فقلت حدثنا حماد بن سلمة فقال لو كان من كتابك فقمت لأخرج كتابي فقبض على ثوبي ثم قال أملله علي فإني أخاف أن لا ألقاك فأمليت عليه ثم أخرجت كتابي فقرأت عليه. Okay, I got the situation here of saying Anas ibn Malik rahimahullah ta'ala that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam left whilst leaning on Usama ibn Zayd yani rahimahullah ta'ala, and that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was wearing a qitri garment which he had thrown on loosely sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he then led them in prayer. Obviously the tradition here is towards the very end of the blessed life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears, such that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has to be assisted into the masjid sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam by two of his companions sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In this tradition here, Sayyidina Anas rahimahullah ta'ala only mentions Sayyidina Usama and Usama ibn Zayd rahimahullah ta'ala. In that, Sayyidina Usama ibn Zayd is going to be a permanent fixture alongside the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Whereas others who assist the Prophet to the mosque, the likes of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, the likes of Sayyidina Ibn Abbas, rahimahullah ta'ala, Fadl, radiallahu anhu, they're not necessarily as payment as Sayyidina Usama, but Usama fixture with the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Hib ibn Hib, as we know, the beloved, the son of the beloved, and radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. So assisting the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to actually enter into the masjid sallallahu alayhi wa sallam at an extremely difficult time for the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in terms of illness. And then the Prophet ﷺ was wearing a qitri garment. And the qitri here, it's going to have two applications according to the Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala. It's from a type of Barud Yemen. So it's Yemeni textile. That is the dominant opinion, the Yemeni textile. And in that, as we said, many of the Imams, rahimahullah ta'ala, they say that the clothes of the Prophet ﷺ were exclusively Yemeni, exclusively, none other than Yemeni, all of his clothes, ﷺ. Any position, how, although some contradict that position, as we see in certain traditions, we get here from amongst them qitri. Some say qitri is not from the brood of Yemen meant here, but qitri, a garment from what we now call Qatar. And a qitri from Qatar in the Bahrain, and Eastern, Arabia. Some say that is what is meant by qitri garment. Prophet had thrown on loosely, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. I wrapped himself in, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, tied upon the shoulder. The garment was tied upon his shoulder, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this one garment that had enveloped the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and the Prophet thereby leads them in prayer, leads the companions in the congregational prayer. And Abd ibn Humayd said, Muhammad ibn Fadl said, Yahya ibn Ma'in asked me about this hadith. And in the very first time he sat with me, Yahya ibn Ma'in of the great Imams, rahimahullah ta'ala, of the third, fourth generation, and rahimahullah ta'ala, in terms of a hadith, and a very famous, mashallah ta'ala, and considered of the highest caliber, radiallahu anhu, Yahya ibn Ma'in. And so Sayyidina Yahya ibn Ma'in, rahimahullah ta'ala, asked me about this hadith when he meets his teacher, Muhammad ibn Fadl, radiallahu anhu, the very first time he sat with me. Okay? I said, Hamad ibn Salama narrated to us. And so now Muhammad ibn Fadl now begins to give his transmission. But as soon as he begins to relate it, where does he relate it from? From memory. Okay? So Sayyidina Yahya ibn Ma'in, rahimahullah ta'ala, says, from the book. أنت من الذين يقيدون الأحاديث. You're from those, mashallah, who write down the hadith of the Rasul. So I want that tradition with transmission from the book in which you wrote it in. I don't want it from memory. Why? Because it's atbat, it's khalas. The book, so long as it's the presupposition, you wrote it down properly, the book's not going to make a mistake, isn't it? Your memory could make a mistake. Hakada Sayyidina Yahya ibn Ma'in, hakada is presupposing first and foremost. What that you rated from the book? And so Sayyidina Muhammad ibn Fadl said, I got up to fetch my book, at which point he grabbed onto the garment. Again, sure. He grabs onto his clothes and says, nah, from memory. He bring it from memory first and foremost. Dictates it to me from memory. Why? For I fear that I might not meet you again. He hakada the hirs, the eagerness for the tradition of the Rasul, like I said, Yahya ibn Ma'in says, the time in which you get up from here to go and get your book, you could die. You could die. And I'm going to miss out on this tradition from the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, give me from memory first, then go and get the book. Sure. And so Sayyidina Muhammad al-Fadl, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, so I dictated to him from memory and then went and fetched my book. And then I read it to him from the book. Shuf kayf. Imam, subhanallah. And it was a single tradition. Radiallahu anhu. يعني وارض سيدنا يحيى بن معين وسيدنا محمد بن فضل وأئمة الدين وبه إليه قال حدثنا سويد بن ناصر حدثنا عبد الله بن المبارك عن سعيد بن إياس يعني الجريري يعني عن أبي نضرة عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله تعالى عنه قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا سجد ثوبا سماه باسمه ثم يقول اللهم لك الحمد كما كسوتنيه أسألك خيره وخير ما صنع له أعوذ بك من شره وشر ما صنع له. هكذا the tradition of Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Khudri يعني rahimahullah ta'ala, that he says that when the Prophet ﷺ put on a new garment, he would mention its name. Okay, the istajadda thawban, it has two meanings. Now one, when the Prophet, as translated, when the Prophet put on a new garment, istajadda jadid. When he sought the jadid, he sought the new, put on the new. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Or istajadda thawba, when he renewed the garment, when he just put on his clothes. And it's better to carry it upon that whenever the Rasul put on clothes, don't think that it's a one-off occasion for the Prophet ﷺ, in that you know that the Rasul ﷺ doesn't change clothes often. As we learned yesterday, the Prophet, when he wears it out. He gives it its haqq. He gives the garment its haqq. And so if he carried it upon whenever he wore new clothes, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, the best you could get upon that is annual, isn't it? For the Eid. That's the best you could get. And the Rasuls have demonstrated the wearing of new clothes upon the Eid. So you see the Rasuls only making this dua at the Eid. But it's daily for the Nabi. It's the Jeddah when he just wore clothes, when he put on his clothes. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Sammahu bi-ismih, that he would mention it by its name. If the Imam would say by the name, what do you mean by the name? Do you mean the generic name? That the Rasul would call a qamis, or a nizar, or a rida, or a imama, al-imama. Is that what you mean by the generic name? Taban, shed, lungi, khuf. Is that what you mean by that? Or samahu bi ismi, that the Prophet ﷺ would give every garment its own name, as we mentioned yesterday. That he has a relationship with his garments. Once you name something, then there's consideration for the named entity, isn't it? Like it's a living entity for you once you give it a name. And how can we understand that? The Prophet ﷺ, that everything in his environment, he gave a name, yani. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. As he said, look, even a sheep, or some of the 100 sheep, which one of us can tell, quote unquote, Dolly from a mate, yani? None of us can tell us, apart from a shepherd. But the Rasul says, I've got 100 sheep, yani. And he gives every single one of them names. And subhanallah, and one of our Shaykh, Shaykh Abdul Hayy al-Mirabi, rahmatullah alayhi, he passed last year, yani, the month of what, Shawwal, last day in Shawwal, and rahmatullah alayhi, Shaykh Abdul Hayy al-Mirabi, there, and he was saying that the Prophet ﷺ had 100 sheep, and he'd give every single one of them a name. Every one of them he'd give a name. Sure, 100 sheep, and every one of them knows them by name. If any of them gave birth, 1, 2, 3, so there's 100, 203, then he'd go and slaughter 1, 2, 3. He always keeps his sheep dead on 100. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And then Shaykh Abdul Hayy al-Imrawi, rahmatullah alayhi, he says, look, the kuffar have dogs. That's what he's saying. And they give their dogs names. If they can give their dogs names, we can give our sheep names. Sure, we can name our sheep. But also what you understand by that, we should have sheep. But you can't give your sheep a name if you don't have any sheep. Not unless you want to name the kebab. You get the point. Which is all the Umar that can be now. We'll name the kebab. But you're not going to own a sheep there. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But the Rasul said even his garments he gave names. Although some of the Imams say, okay, if you give the garments names, show us. And some of them, in terms of what they call asanida sahiha, they say, well, we don't have any proof of any name for the particular garment of the Rasul size. We mean a garment in peacetime. Obviously, the garments in war, then we know the names of the Prophet size, garments in war, the instruments of war. So it's like the helmet of the Prophet, like the body armor of the Rasul. We've got the names of that. But if you've got the names of that, that should suffice. No, but we want the names of like what was the shirt of the Nabi and what was the izar of the Nabi called sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the only real tradition that we've got there is the turban of the Prophet, which then suffices. And that day, the turban of the Rasul is called sahab, the clouds, sahab. And that turban was called Sahab, that the Prophet ﷺ gifted it to whom? Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anhu warda. That's why once then Sayyidina Ali, now when he begins to wear the turban of the Rasul that was called Sahab, and in the cloud, not Apple, the cloud, the cloud, that the turban of the Prophet ﷺ, that's what you want to upload to, isn't it? His turban, Sayyidina Ali comes unto the Nabi ﷺ, and so the Prophet ﷺ says, here comes Ali in the cloud. So he comes in the cloud that he's wearing Sahab, the turban of the Prophet ﷺ. So that they samahu bismi. The Rasul ﷺ, he would mention its name. He's going to call the garment by its name. Like the intimacy he has with clothes ﷺ. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, oh Allah, to you is all praise. Lakal hamd, all praise belongs to you. Why? Kama kasawtani. Because you are the one who has clothed me in this, isn't it? And that has to be a recognition. And which one of us, when we wake up in the morning, we recognize that the clothes we put on, minhu, from him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which one of us, when we eat, break, fast, we recognize minhu, that is from him, Jalla Jalaluhu wa ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala inside the Hadith Qudsi, Ya ibn Adam, O son of Adam, kullukum aar. He says, kullukum aar. What does kullukum aar mean? All of you are naked, illa man kasawtu, except the one who I've clothed. Fastaksuni. So seek clothing from me, come, then I will clothe you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. And the Rasul shown us here inside his dua, oh Allah, to you is all praise. In that you have clothed me in this. So, and so thereby ask you for its good and the good for which it was made. Niyat. What was the niyat of the one who plucked the cotton? What was the niyat of the one who spinned the spindle? What was the niyat of the one who stitched the textile? What was the niyat? And when these clothes arrive at you, what was the niyat there? I ask you for the good of the garment and the good for what it was made for, what it was manufactured for. The intents there, I want the good. But the word of opposites. But likewise, I also take refuge in you from its evil. And what you say, what's its evil? When you're wearing garments that don't concur with the Shara. That there first and foremost. And you wear garments that what Allah Ta'ala doesn't permit. Then sure, for some people on a higher plane, you wear garments that the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you can't trace back to the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Remember, there are people who make clothes in contradiction of the Nabi. Sure, if they're not trying to make clothes to facilitate you drawing closer to Allah Ta'ala, they want to make clothes so you could be disobedience to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu wa Ta'ala. And it cave, yeah. Sure, it's like, saying Asma, radiallahu anha wardaha. Asma, the great Asma, saying Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr, wardaha. Once a woman brings her a garment, Asma says, take that garment out of my face, Shari. Get it out of my face. She say that, Asma. She says, yeah, Asma. She said, oh, Asma, yani khalas, it's not translucent, yani. I mean, you can't see the form through it. She says to Asma, yani khalas, it's covered in the form. Asma says, but it's describing the body. Sure. But it's describing the body. Get it away from it. The care and consideration they had for the Shara, for the law, clothes, mashallah ta'ala, being what it means of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ascending the ladder of obedience. With Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, the evil and the evil for what it was created. Many of them, nasallallahu salam al-afiyah. And they cast their evil in clothes, they cast their evil in food. They cast their evil inside the vehicles. And here we are gullible and we embrace all the evil that they cast in front of us without any shuf. Like, the evil of AI. That evil there. And it's like, how do we embrace AI? How can AI help me in my life for the work that I have? And you ain't even tested it yet, where the source it came from. It's sure. Like sometimes the simple reality, often you got simplicity in life. You see, like, these things that the modern world, the most evil world that the world's ever seen, the world in which we now live in. Make sure you get that by default, yeah. And all of these sort of things that they cast quote unquote into our lap, we ask a simple question. Would the Prophet have embraced it? If you are uncertain, you say, Naam, the Rasul would have embraced this, do it. Go forth with that. Yeah. When you say, Naam, in be one time, would have been there, he had embraced it, then you're good, yeah, you're good. But now if you hesitate, then hesitate. And if you're certain no, then khalas, isn't it? Abate. How can it should be, yani? But it is gullible. like we're like the sheep in it. هكذا the sheep با يعني هكذا يا نسأل الله السلامة والعافية. يعني سبحان الله. يعني بيسأل الله تعالى فتوبي إليه. قال حدثنا هشام بن يونس الكوفي حدثنا القاسم بن مالك المزني عن الجريري عن أبي ناظرة عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله تعالى عنه وعن أبيه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نحوه. Okay, since Abu Sa'id al-Khudri rahimahullah ta'ala will be with a different chain of transmission, related tradition from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with a meaning similar to the aforementioned. وبه إليه قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار حدثنا معاذ ابن هشام يعني حدثنا أبي عن أبي قتادة عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله تعالى عنه قال كان أحب ثياب إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يلبسه الحبرة. Okay, the hadith in Anas, the article of clothing most beloved to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam, and it was the hibara. And the hibara likewise also it's a garment muzayyin, it's a shirt that is muzayyin or is decorated again with pinstripes, with the pinstripes, like the hibara. Okay, most beloved to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, still quote unquote, it can enter under the rubric of being a shirt, or likewise they enter under the rubric of also being a cloak of the Nabi صلى الله عليه وسلم considered. النبي إليه قال حدثنا محمود بن غيلان حدثنا عبد الرزاق حدثنا سفيان عن عون ابن أبي جحيفة عن أبيه رضي الله تعالى عنه قال رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعليه حلة حمراء كأني أنظر إلى بريق ساقي. قال سفيان أراها حبرا. Okay, it's a tradition here of Abu Juhayfa يعني رضي الله تعالى يعني عنه يعني وارضاه, who said I saw the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم as he was, I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and wearing two red garments, as we know, garments, red pinstripes, and the hulla and the suit and the rida as well as the izar. It is as if I am looking at the radiance of his blessed shin sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, for me, take from that the izar, the lower garment of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ila nisfi saqay, and it went, mashallah ta'ala, to the midst of the actual shin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and upon that became the Sahaba. It's like the tradition we read of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Khattab rahimahullah ta'ala. He has his izar, the lower garment, okay, and then the Prophet hears a voice says irfa, and raise the garment. So I turn around for Idan Nabi. There's the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, and so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam raise it, and he's motioning with the hand, raise it. So Abdullah ibn Umar raises it, rolls it up. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and more raises it. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam more rolls it up, raises it. The Rasul, right there, keep it there. So Abdullah ibn Umar rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, so I took out a knife and gashed my leg at the exact mark that the Rasul went. He's gashed his leg, he made a line upon his leg. You know, this is exactly where the Prophet pointed to. That's Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum yani wa ardahum. Yeah, the tradition here radiallahu ta'ala anhu, as if I'm looking at the radiance of his blessed shins now, saying Sufyan yani al-Thawri and rahimahullah ta'ala said, I think it was a hibara, Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah sanad. Although the sanad and hadathana Sufyan, it says Sufyan. Okay, but here there are two great Sufyans in the sanad. They're both of them, mashallah, of the same race. Saying Sufyan al-Thawri and saying Sufyan ibn Uyayna, yani rahimahullah ta'ala. The Imams rahimahullah ta'ala of the Iraq, although obviously Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Nazil Makkah, he enters the Mecca and becomes the Imam of the Haram, Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Both of them, the Sufyanan, they're called. Both either utliq Sufyan, but whenever you just say Sufyan, without saying is it a Thawri or is it Ibn Uyayna, rahimahullah ta'ala, it always means a Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala, who's the greater of them in degrees, saying Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala, although both of them are imams of the highest caliber, radiallahu ta'ala, anhuma. Okay, وبه إليه قال حدثنا علي ibn خشرم حدثنا عيسى ibn يونس عن إسرائيل عن أبي إسحاق عن البراء بن عازب رضي الله تعالى عنه قال ما رأيت أحدا من الناس أحسن في حلة حمراء من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم إن كانت جمته لتضرب قريبا من منكبيه. Tradition in Shaykh Ibrahim ibn Azib rahimahullah ta'ala, I've never seen anyone more handsome the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as he was wearing two garments, and that he was wearing two garments. But the garment ain't got nothing to do with it. Don't think that the garment enhances beauty. No, it enhances the beauty of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dhatiya. The Jamal of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, dhatiya. It's essential beauty sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not enhanced by quote on anything that we could ever consider to be physical. But he's just remarking, mashallah ta'ala, rather than the garment making the Rasul sallallahu beautiful, it's the Rasul making the garment beautiful. That's why that also catches his eyes. Sayyidina Bara ibn Azib, yani rahimahullah ta'ala. And I can know the beauty of that, Sayyidina Bara ibn Azib, these are youth from the Sahaba. Youth, yani. Bara, yani, mashallah, from the youngsters, teenagers, yani, but speaking of when the Prophet sallallahu and he passes away, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, never mind, quote unquote, the years, the 10 years he's going to spend with the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Medina to Munawwara. But look at the eyes of the youth. Look at the eyes of teenage at the gaze upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's remarkable, yani. The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum wardahum, and the purity that they had in terms of eyesight and heart sight radiallahu ta'ala anhum, yani wardahum. I've never seen anyone more handsome than the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was wearing two red garments. Oh, that's a second. His blessed hair fell close to his shoulders, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Jummah, as we know, in terms of the length of the hair of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the blessed shoulders of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وبه إليه قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار أنبأنا عبد الرحمن بن مهدي حدثنا عبيد الله بن إياد عن أبيه عن أبي رمثة قال رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعليه بردان أخضران. Okay, the tradition here of Abu Rimtha, I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wearing two green stitched garments, obviously, but the burda also, the garments here are cloaks. Yani. A burda is a cloak. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most famous of all garments, the cloak of the Nabi, yani sallallahu alaihi yani wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. But the Sahaba radiallahu anhum wardahum were blessed to imitate the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam therein. And likewise, obviously, from amongst the Sahaba, they were blessed to embrace his very burda, isn't it? That's the beauty, as you mentioned, saying Ka'b ibn Zuhair, ibn Abi Sulma radiallahu anhu wardaha, inna Rasulallah sayfun yustada'u bihi mahanadan min suyuf illahi maslulu. When he quotes his famous line of poetry in Banat Su'ad al-Qalbi Matbulu, when he quotes it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in praising the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, and the Rasul just stands. And I could have the Imams, rahimahullah ta'ala, they show you that they're from the adillah of standing in the Mawlid when the Rasul is praised. Yeah, isn't it? Because the Rasul stands himself. Inna Rasul la sayfun yustada'u bihi muhannadan min suyufillahi maslulu. And the Rasul is standing there. And the Rasul takes off his burda and just wraps it around Sayyidina Ka'b ibn Zuhair radiallahu ta'ala anhu wardahu. And that becomes, mashallah ta'ala, the supreme burda there. That's why we said Ibrahim al-Bayjuri, rahimahullah, the great Imam, and Shaykh of Azhar, and radiallahu ta'ala anhu wardahu, Imam radiallahu anhu wardahu, Bayjuri, rahimahullah ta'ala, as he said, the poem of the great companion, Sayyidina Ka'b ibn Zuhair, that's the burda. He said, it's not Busayri. So the burda is the poem, Banat Su'ad, yani, of what of Sayyidina Ka'b ibn Zuhair. Whereas we should call the burda of Busayri, let's call that the Shifa, isn't it? Call that one the Shifa. But call what? Ka'b, call that the burda, because he actually received the actual burda from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and thereby was left as well as inheritance inside of the family of Sayyidina Ka'b ibn Zuhair. And then thereby in the age of Sayyidina Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, Sayyidina Muawiyah bought it off already. Sayyidina Muawiyah goes and buys it off from Darahim, yani, for dirhams, mashallah ta'ala, hundreds of thousands. Yani Sayyidina Muawiyah is going to buy it off one of the offspring of Sayyidina Ka'b ibn Zuhair, and then that becomes the official garment, isn't it, of our Banu Umayyah. And so Banu Umayyah now, whenever it's Jum'ah, and they're going to lead from what? From the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. That's the epicenter of it. Like when now the Caliph in the Umayyad Mosque inside of Damascus takes to the minbar, he's wearing the actual burda of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It becomes the actual official garment of what? Of the Umayyads, yani, in that age. Yani. And that's despite, yani, it's not like we've got a lot of good ways to say about the Umayyads, yani, but that one we'll accept, innit? Mashallah, we'll accept the fact that they revered, subhanAllah, they revered the actual burda of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then you look at the cognitive dissonance here now, is that sure, here you are wearing the burda of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And on the minbar, your case in Sayyidina Ali, your case in Sayyidina Hassan, your case in Sayyidina Hussein, on the minbar was wearing the burda of their grandfather, sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. Sure. Until the coming of Sayyidina Umar Abdul Aziz, he's going to put an end to that, isn't it? That's the greatest Umar Abdul Aziz. when he takes khilafat, and no longer you're going to stand up on the mimbar here and curse the very family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But هكذا يعني ما شاء الله تعالى. And هكذا يعني سبحان الله ما شاء الله تعالى. Not like the Mullah Umar, they see Mullah Umar. You don't see that Mullah Umar there, that Mullah Umar. When he has the burden of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stands. Ever seen the burden? Oh, from that day, I loved Mullah Umar. Don't care what they say. Don't care what the Guardian says or the Times or the Independent says. MashaAllah. Just for the fact that he's there, exalting, he's got the burden of the Rasul sallallahu Mullah Umar there. Subhanallah. Yani, rahmatullah alayhi. Rahmatullah alayhi. Whatever they say, you don't believe them. You don't believe them. Subhanallah. Mullah Umar there, you know, in the Hijrah, we discussed the Hijrah and the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ya Sayyid. The Prophet recited it and then walks past. Subhanallah. It's a tradition that Mullah Umar did the same, isn't it? You see, the Fakir was listening to it like when the Americans are there, they were on CNN, and you see they've surrounded him, they've got him, they've got him, finally got Mullah Umar, and they said Mullah Umar, then like every hour, don't want to be going in now, they finally got Mullah Umar. They didn't think they lost him. And you know how they lost him? They said, sure, like what he did a year later, that he took from the Rasul, recited Yasin, and he went on a bike, a little bicycle, not even a motorbike, a bicycle, and he rode right through the Americans on a bike. Probably with the burden of the Rasul wrapped around him, innit? Bilbo Baggins and all that stuff, yeah, in the cloak of the Rasul, ain't nobody seeing you, yeah, MashaAllah ta'ala. Blessed, innit? Blessed. They can't define who we love. And you can't define that. They can't define who we respect and who we revere. They can't. We just place everybody on the standard of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And if there's the least connection, like that Banu Umayyah are going to wear his burda, then we'll give you props for that. For the rest, we're going to have a problem with you over all the rest of your dastardly actions. But by the fact that you're going to wear the burda and exalt it upon khayru yawm talat alayhi shams, upon the best day that the sun has ever risen upon, the Jum'ah in and of itself, we're going to give you props for that. Isn't it? Mullah Umar. Allah bless. Rahmatullahu ta'ala alayh. And subhanallah, people are going to be in trouble with Allah ta'ala. When Allah ta'ala reveals what he reveals, subhanahu wa ta'ala, you often find yourself upon the wrong side, innit? And worst thing, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا, where you actually think you're doing good. Do you get the point? No, نحن مصلحون. No, we're the muslihun. Allah said, you know, the mufsidun ain't doing no good. Allah Jalla says, I mean, standards, heck of the knowledge, it's through ignorance, quote, you make wrong choices in life. Yeah. Worse, if you have knowledge, you make wrong choices in life. But it's through ignorance you make wrong choices in life, isn't it? And ilm, yeah. And ilm Muhammadi, and the knowledge of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In our day and age, there are no greater disciplines, yeah. There's no greater discipline. Just like the Imam of Hadramaut, rahimahullah ta'ala, Mustafa al-Eidarus, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said at the end of time, the only act that is accepted by Allah ta'ala, hatman, without a shadow of a doubt, is what? Salawat. What you take from that which connects directly to the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Yes, it's his theology. Yes, it's his law. Yes, it's his spirituality, etc. But the sciences that are most important at the end of time, the sciences of Nubuwwah. Which is just al-ulum al-Mustafawiyya, al-ulum al-Muhammadiyya. Those sciences that give you a really profound and direct relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that you know him. Because there is a difference, although as he said, in both is good, but there's a difference between knowing his law and knowing him. Yeah. And we're not trying to make a dichotomy there. Both shuf, there is a difference, and I'm trying an experiential difference between knowing the law, shuf, cave, because heck at the end of time, isn't it? That the first people to declare war upon the Mahdi are the fuqaha, yani. The people of the law. What went wrong there? The fuqaha. And Ibn Arabi says if they could, yani, لَأَفْتَى بِقَطْرِهِ, they make fatwa for the Mahdi to be killed, yani. Seek and destroy, yani. There, shuf, cave, drones and everything, searching for the Mahdi in the sky, yani. How did they make a fatwa for? They had the fuqaha. They took the fiqh, yani. There's a farq between what you're embracing the law and you're studying the law and you're holding fast to the law at the expense of, mashallah ta'ala, the sciences of Nabuwwah that draw you ever close to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. طيب الإمام رحمه الله تعالى إذا قال حدثنا عبد بن حمير قال حدثنا عفان يعني ابن مسلم حدثنا عبد الله بن الحسان يعني العنبري عن جدتيه جحيبة وعليبة عن قيلة بنت مخرمة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعليه أسمال مليتين كانتا بزعفران وقد نفضته. وفي الحديث قصة طويلة يعني هكذا سيدة قيلة بنت مخرمة رضي الله تعالى عنها. She said, I saw the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم wearing two well-worn garments dyed with saffron, and though only a slight trace of the saffron remained on them. Okay, others can understand that as in the clothes that some of the saffron is actually falling off the garment of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, and the saffron, quote unquote, worth more than its weight in gold. Yeah, saffron expensive. Yeah, and so the hadith. Although, but look at it, the garments are well worn. You read it, but still, mashallah, the remnants of the saffron that they once dyed with. يعني there is a lengthy story behind يعني this hadith. He says, well, عن hadith يعني famous in Qayla bint Makhrama رضي عنها وارضاها, where she enters into the mosque of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, and from behind the Nabi. She's from behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then as she enters into the mosque, she sees the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, eye from the behind, at the Rasul facing Qibla, and she's behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she says, as soon as Qayla bint Makhrama, she says, as soon as she sees the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, irta'attu min al-faraq, I just begin to shake. He just shaking the Rasul, and from here he's in the opposite direction. Although we understand peripheral vision, 360 peripheral vision, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but still, shuf, she's just shaking in the presence of the Prophet. Irta'attu min al-faraq. Okay, and then thereby a companion who sees her, he says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, undur ila al-miskina, and look at the poor woman. Look at the poor woman. And the Rasul la yaltafit. The Rasul doesn't turn around, because the Rasul sees 360 peripheral sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Rasul simply says, يعني as min al-miskina alayha sakina. Al-miskina alayha sakina. The poor woman may tranquility, serenity descend upon her. She says, as soon as the Rasul says that, I just stilled, she just stilled like that, radiallahu ta'ala anha, and waradaha. But when she's seeing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just things that she notices about the Prophet, like his posture. She notices the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's sitting qurfasa, he's squatting. He's in a squatting position. And the muta'ar ras, she notices that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's head and is bowed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She also gets a sense of his state, because in the tradition she said, kal mutakhashshi', the khushu' of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this sort of fearful humility. He's in a state of beauty, that's humility, but he's also in a state of mashallah, of majesty, that they're impressing upon him, that the fear the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has. And then that they irradiate from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam till it grips here. That's where irta'attu min al-faraq. I begin to shake min al-faraq. Al-faraq is ma'an al-faraq, khawf, fear. It's a type of fear. The instinct is to take flight, It's fright that brings about flight. That's what we call faraq in the Arabic language. Irta'attu min al-faraq. She wants to run, but she can't, she's jammed in her position. Until the Rasul sallallahu al-miskina alayha sakina. But of the things she also notices is what the Prophet sallallahu is wearing upon that day. And that's what we want inside this chapter. And likewise, that the Prophet sallallahu is wearing two well-worn garments dyed with saffron, though only a slight trace of saffron remained upon them. وبه إليه قال حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد حدثنا بشر بن المفضل عن عبد الله بن عثمان خشيم عن سعيد بن جبير عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عليكم بالبياض من الثياب ليلبسها أحياكم وكفنوا فيها موتاكم فإنها من خير ثيابكم. هكذا the tradition of Sayyidina Sa'id ibn Jubayr on the authority of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, who reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, wear white clothes. Ibn Sulbid, wear white. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, let your living wear them. It's clothes that we wear inside of this life, white. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and shroud your dead in them. Okay, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, white, for white is the best of your attire, it's the best of your clothing. Khayri thiyabikum, khayri libasikum. He says, sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, and that's why thereafter, often, mashallah ta'ala, it's reserved for those special days, for those high days and holidays, mashallah ta'ala, that the wearing of white is reserved for. Because we understand his commandments, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through that which he espoused. And what I mean he espoused, so the Rasul's not ordinarily going to wear white. And the Prophet really going to wear white, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in terms of his clothing. And so why? It's, mashallah, for the best of days, the likes of Jummah. You'll find that the Prophet on that sunnah of the Jummah to wear white. And the Imam we mentioned before, Ibrahim al-Bayjuri, and rahimahullah ta'ala, he said everything should be white, inside and outside, shi'aran wa dithara. So much should wear completely white clothes as a way of exalting, mashallah ta'ala, the day of Jummah in and of itself. So it's special clothing as understood. Rabi Readings قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار حدثنا عبد الرحمن بن مهدي حدثنا سفيان عن حبيب ابن أبي ثابت عن ميمون ابن أبي شبيب عن سمرة ابن جندب رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم البسوا البياض إن أطهر وأطيب وكفنوا فيها موتاكم. In the hadith of Sayyidina Samir ibn Jundub, he reported the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, wear white clothes, for they are the purest and the best. The Prophet athar, and the purest, not just here in spiritual purity, but also in physical purity. And white clothes, they'll show up date, isn't it? And so, mashallah ta'ala, they consider the purest and the cleanest. Anqa. Okay, anqa means what? Yani purity in terms of cleanliness. And then likewise, atyab, and the best of atyab, the most beautiful of clothing. Yani atyab, any better here translated. Yani, and likewise, shroud your dead in them. And that day, mashallah, honor, isn't it? That we send them, mashallah ta'ala, we bid farewell to those dearly beloved and recently departed. Wearing the best of clothes, isn't it? In the best of states. And clean in terms of body, clean in terms of clothes. MashaAllah ta'ala, perfume. Look, shuf kayf. How we send them, quote unquote, to the barzakh, MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Yani honored. وبه إليه قال حدثنا أحمد بن منيع حدثنا يحيى بن زكريا يعني ابن أبي زائدة حدثنا أبي عن مصعب بن شيبة يعني عن صفية بنت شيبة عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت خرج رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات غداة وعليه مرط من شعر أسود صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم يعني in hadith of Sayyidina Aisha, that he went out one morning wrapped in a long and wide cloak made out of black hair. And it made out of black hair. What do you mean hair? What type of hair? Camel hair. The textile was made out of camel's hair. If you want to get a sense, anyone who's been the Badia, and black camels here, like for instance the Marabitun there, in the Shanqit, in the Sahara there, where you see the tents of the Marabit you call like Marabit al-Hajj, you see those black tents, that's black camel hair. And so you understand, you get a sense of it, the type of textile, that this garment that the Prophet was wearing. Like he's wearing a garment made out of black camel's hair, sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama. And it's a tradition. وبه إليه قال حدثنا يوسف بن عيسى حدثنا وكيع حدثنا يونس بن أبي إسحاق عن أبيه عن الشعبي عن عروة ابن المغيرة ابن شعبة عن أبيه عن المغيرة بن شعبة رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لبس جبة رومية ضيقة الكمين. هكذا the final tradition in the chapter inshallah ta'ala, which is the tradition of Sayyidina Mughira, يعني المغيرة بن شعبة يعني رضي الله عنه وارضاء الثقفي يعني from Banu Thaqif, يعني from Taif, يعني رضي الله تعالى عنه يعني وارضاه, and thereby those who migrate unto the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, يعني a mass murderer, serial killer, Jahiliyyah, serial killer, killed quote all of his tribe, the dedication to the Muqawqis there, Mughira bin Shu'bah, Shuf, and he kills them all, and uncles, nephews, Shuf, kill them all. يعني سيدنا مغيرة بن شعبة جاهلية يعني the Muqawqis, subhanallah, because they go to the Muqawqis, the Coptic king يعني, and then when the Coptic king, the Muqawqis, they honors this delegation that comes from the Taif, they're in the mountains of the Hijaz, they honor them, honors with gifts. So that night they go back to where they were staying to divvy up the gifts. And so when they divvy up the gifts, they give everyone a gift apart from Mughira bin Shu'bah. So Mughira bin Shu'bah that complains, what do you mean? How come everybody get a portion? I was there as well, but you don't give me. He said, no, because you're the youngest one. And he said, youth, darb min al-junoon, touch of madness, yani. You're the youngest one. So he decides to kill them all and then take it all. Shuf. And like, how did you come to that conclusion, yani? That because you didn't get a few Christmas presents, that you're going to now go and kill them all, yani? So he kills them all. Subhanallah, Jahiliyyah, Ajib, yani, Jahiliyyah. And then thereby he realizes, what about just doing in it? Like after the fact, he realized the gravity of the act that you just did. He just like a mass murderer, yani. Subhanallah. Like, subhanAllah. That day, there's got to be a propensity for that, isn't it? SubhanAllah, we were discussing with Amir there, like that rapper there who was killed, King Von. Like, so that King Von there, like some people, like, subhanAllah, they like killing yani. But subordinately, and quote on Kayfa Metudin to Dan, you like it, and somebody else like it too, yani. Somebody like that's the one's going to take your life, isn't it? I kind of show for that. I kind of quote, as they say, the universe has a habit of giving back, isn't it? That which we send forth into it. And the universe, God, Jalla Jalaluhu wa ta'ala, yani, not the universe doesn't do anything. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. Dhaka huwa Allah, that's Allah Jalla fil ula. Kill them all. So what does he do? What can I do? So he's head of the Prophet sallallahu Muslim, head of the Nabi sallallahu. Am we going to flee to that one? I'm just going to flee to him and ask him for jiwar. I'm going to ask him for protection. So he gets to the Prophet sallallahu and then he asks the Rasul sallallahu for jiwar. Just protect me, protect me. And the Rasul gives him it. Imagine that day, mashallah ta'ala. SubhanAllah gives him, yeah, you've got my jiwar. Because it's as if from a perspective, look, you've honored me in that you believe I can protect you, isn't it? And so the Rasul gives him jiwar. There was once we were in the deserts in Mauritania, sure. And there's this next man, Allahu Alam. You know, show you next one, really next one. So you know when there's food and the food's laid out, next man will just pop up. Just pop up and start eating, yani. And as soon as he's finished, disappears into the midst of the night. Sure, every time. Fakir thought it was just like accidental, yani, in the beginning. Next time food's laid out, pops up again. Starts eating, man makes a dash for it, yani. Like, sure, okay. So Fakir asked him, no, yani, what is affair, yani? Oh, they said, oh, my man, one of those irhabi, yani, my man, terrorist there, from Mali there, from the borders of Mali. Sure. Whenever they was trouble in Mali, and a few years ago, he said, so, yani, the government, yani, he was hunted by the government. They chased him all the way from Mali to Mauritania. Government forces had to apprehend him, and all those who were blowing up things and what have you. Yeah, he was detonating vests. Them ones there, Shuf Cave. And so they chased them all the way to Mauritania. Man realizes when he's being chased, the chase is on. The only place he thinks he's got safety is Marab al-Hajj. Man was hardcore Wahhabi, yeah, hardcore. And he flees all the way to Marab al-Hajj. Yeah. When he gets to Marab al-Hajj, he's asking Marab al-Hajj for jiwar, yeah, for jiwar. Protect me. Marab al-Hajj, you got it. You're under my protection. The security forces come to Twemeret there. They surround the encampment of Marab al-Hajj, hand him over. Marab al-Hajj says, nah, as soon as he's fled to me, he ain't going anywhere. I ain't handing nobody over. Like he's come to me, he's had a good opinion of me, so he's protected by me. He's shuf. So they, hekara, mashallah ta'ala, they respect Marab al-Hajj. Okay, you've got him. He's protected by you. So long as he's in this encampment. If he steps a foot outside of it, he's ours, and we met him there in the encampment. Popping up, man was Wahhabi, hardcore. He believed Marab al-Hajj was a mubtada', was a heretic. The Haddamin was a heretic. They were all heretics. He never prayed behind Haddamin. So why are you praying Haddamin? Haddamin mubtada'. Some people, the world pops up strange people. The world does. So Mughayr ibn Shu'bah, rahimahullah ta'ala, becomes this great companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And his tradition, he's the last man to touch the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said when they're burying the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said Mughayr ibn Shu'bah, they buried the Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, displaced the Rasul inside of his lahad, and covered up the lahad. Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib jumps to the top of the earth, and now they want to bury the Prophet. He placed the earth down, and Sayyidina Mughayr ibn Shu'bah flips his ring into the grave. Says, oops, my ring. Drop my ring right there. Mughayr ibn Shu'bah is known Ahl al-Da'aba, yani, of those, he likes having fun, yani. He's known as, Allah, he didn't have fun, he had fun that night as well, isn't it? With his uncles and all that stuff. But sure, accidentally on purpose drops his ring into the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oops. Gotta go down, my ring fell in. Sure. And so Mughayr ibn Shu'bah in the riwayah, he descends into the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, gets his ring, then he places his hands in and just touches the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, I'm the last man to touch the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he jumps back upon it. But there's another riwayah, different to reconcile, but you can, that when he drops his ring into it, he goes, oops, my ring, gotta go down. Sayyidina Ali stops him. Says, it's not going to be said a man dropped his ring into the grave of the Rasul and then descended into the grave of the Rasul to retrieve his ring. Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajhu says. So Sayyidina Ali says, I'm going down. So Sayyidina Ali goes down and he touches the Prophet Sallallahu. It was the last man to touch the Nabi Sallallahu. How could he got to reconcile? Now the way you'd reconcile it is saying the Mughira kept trying to do it, innit? He got away with it once. When he tries it the second time, Ali like, nah, it's not going to be said. You're going to keep doing that one. Step back, Ali. Sayyidina Ali knows he's the last man to touch the Nabi. And I know that Sayyidina Ali like that. When Mughira goes down, nah. You are not going to be the last man to touch the Prophet Sallallahu. That's me. And so Sayyidina Ali rahimahullah ta'ala thereafter descend, and touch the Prophet Sallallahu. But look at the fakhr. And you can, I'm the last man to touch the Nabi. What they compete. وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. And that if you want to compete, let them compete as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. The last tradition, he said, the Prophet once wore a long Byzantine jubba, an outer garment, an overgarment that had narrow sleeves. Okay, here Byzantium, although it's a jubba Rumiya, so Rumiya, Rome, yani. So it's a Roman garment, and there's another riwayat which says Shamiya, that it was a garment from the Levant, and the way you reconcile between them is because obviously Sham was under the jurisdiction of Rome. It was part of Byzantium, yeah, part of it, yeah. The second you reconcile, or the others say, but crafted at the hands of the Byzantiums, okay? The garment that the Prophet ﷺ wore. And obviously that what that legitimizes or clarifies first and foremost, that the Prophet ﷺ wore a garment that was other than Yemeni. That's the first thing you can take from that. So the opinion that he wore exclusively Yemeni clothes, then it shows this hadith would seemingly contradict that, isn't it? He wore other than Yemeni ﷺ, and then thereby also it legitimizes, and we're talking about upon Muhammadiyya, of wearing other than Yemeni textile, isn't it? And that it's not peculiar, quote unquote, to Rome or to Byzantium or Shuf, what have you, or to Sham even. They just legitimizes non-Yemeni from that perspective. And everybody taken to their own textile, regardless of, although there's a hierarchy. I know that at the head of the hierarchy, the epitome there is what is a textile, and from Yemen. But what you get from it, that it had narrow sleeves, because ordinarily the actual garments that the Prophet wears, wasi' al-kum in the tradition, wasi' al-kum. They have, mashallah ta'ala, they have wide sleeves. Remember, Abu Hurairah, rahimahullah ta'ala, can throw his cat in his sleeve. As Abu Hurairah, the one of the cat, why he's called the Rasul called Abu Hurairah, Abu Hir, and the father of the kitten, the father of the cat, and because he's always with this cat, radiallahu anhu wa rasul Abu Hurairah. And begin Abu Hurairah didn't like it. The cat there, shuf, just following Abu Hurairah, the cat took to Abu Hurairah, radiallahu anhu wa rasul. And the day by Abu Hurairah anhu took to the cat, mashallah ta'ala. He said the Rasul had a cat in it, Mu'izza. The Prophet had a cat called Mu'izza, the name of the cat, name and everything, even the cat. And subhanAllah, that's probably that cat, and maybe you can add to that the cat of saying Abu Hurairah, probably the only two cats in the history of the universe that are not psychos. Other than that, every cat is a psycho. Cats are psychotic. They're psycho. He said the cat is 95% tiger. 95% tiger, cat, and Fakir read once that cats, they have a desire to kill their owner. You just have to too little. That's why when the cat playing with you, you get the cat, oh sweet. The cat like really going for it, really trying to kill you, but it just doesn't have the ability, the size to kill. Cats are psychotic, psychos to the core, sure. That's why you should better, and the fuqaha can debate about whether it's permissible for you to domesticate the cat. The advice of the faqih, don't domesticate the cat, Let the cat just run and go freely, in the wild, in the wilderness, as far from your home as possible. Sure. So the Prophet once had a long Byzantine jubba, overgarment that had narrow sleeves. Tayyib, inshallah ta'ala. I don't have any questions or points, inshallah ta'ala.
Are there any clothing that you see Muslims wear a lot today, but they're actually not from the Sunnah at all?
Allah, of course, that did, of course. Overwhelming majority of what Muslims wear in general. It's when you say Muslim clothing, remember, because the meanings of the Sunnah, the meanings of the Shara obviously wider than the actual Sunnah in and of itself, are vast, and they're more so principial, So the principles, and so mashallah ta'ala, the Muslim world has embraced, mashallah ta'ala, the principles of the law and the principles of the Sunnah, and upon that, they've taken, or you could say they've modified that which was more traditional, quote unquote, in terms of their own heritage. And so in that there's clear khair, clear. Okay, clear khair.
Shaykh, is there any dangers associated with AI that Muslims should be aware of?
AI evil, yani. AI is evil to the core, yani. That there. Yani, sure, not there. You know. Kada, yani, AI evil, yani. That's what we say. One should be truly aware of it, yani, or beware of it. AI, we mentioned AI, artificial intelligence. AI, artificial intelligence. Now, what is reading it recently, it was an article The Guardian had just over a week ago in a book being released upon it, that they're saying AI is no longer artificial intelligence, but it's alien intelligence. That it's displaying an intelligence that completely differs from human intelligence. So that you believe that it's human intelligence, you get the point, that governs it, it's now displaying features that shows you it's beyond human intelligence. It's actually an alien intelligence. So AI now is moving towards alien intelligence. You with it? Not they're problematic. You get the point. And I think the article, if people look in the Guardian, it was sort of entitled like, be careful of the powers that you summon. You get the point. And then when you actually look at that title, summoning whom? Summoning from where? And that's what we mentioned to students there, that quote unquote, that A for us, maybe in our sort of cosmology, A, we could also use A for Abqar. And so Abqar here, A, Abqar. Abqar is the capital city of the jinn. The world is called Abqar. And so AI there, Abqari intelligence. Yeah. It's the intelligence of the jinn that we're seeing now emerge inside of human society. And then that's been foretold by the Prophet ﷺ. And if it's not AI, then you just tell us where it is. Tell us where it is. It's somewhere, yani. I mean, this is their technology after all. That we're pretty clear upon that. And so why now in one of them, why when they send their technology, they themselves wouldn't thereby begin to send themselves into our society to take a land that was once theirs, to govern a people that they believe should be their slaves. Yani. You get the point? And we should be careful of it. Be careful of the powers that you summon, yani. And be careful of anything that manifests in our day and age, quote unquote, that doesn't have the stamp of Muhammadiyya, the stamp of ikhlas upon it. And we're not saying it's necessarily bad, but at least investigate it. And then that day, the job of the fuqaha ultimately, yani, radiallahu anhum, and then the job of us, yani, khalas, taslim, that we should submit until the fuqaha give us, quote unquote, the green light. Remember, when in good ages, like, the last time we really had khilafat, yani, Banu Uthman there, the Gutenberg press, a press, yani, a press, a printing press and a print book. It took them 400 years before the fuqaha allowed. 400 years. That they were good generations, yani. You get the point? Because how can you know, quote unquote, as a faqih, how can you know the value of something unless you see the effects of it? And the effects can be multiple generational, yani, isn't it? Like you can't say, okay, this is good or that's bad. No, we've got to see how does it play out, yani. So, but the immediacy now of the ummah embracing things that are not theirs, yani, and that have really not just foreign stamps upon them, very alien stamps upon them. Okay? That just shows us where we've arrived at, yani, where we've arrived at. Aywa? How often? No, and black is a common color of the Prophet ﷺ, and of the garments made mention, black for the Prophet ﷺ. So we made mention, and we'll come to the turbans of the Prophet ﷺ, and all the tradition that exclusively black of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's a common color of the Prophet ﷺ.
Shaykh, my degree is in AI, so
yeah, no, you get the point. There's two ways to look at it. The first way to look at it, change your degree, and if you change your degree, then nobody could say you did something wrong. So that they just wara, that they khalas, you get the point. Otherwise, you'd say somebody becomes really rooted in religion, rooted in the deen of Allah Ta'ala, because quote unquote, like the Imams rahimahullah Ta'ala, they had to truly understand Hellenistic philosophy in order to understand how it creeps into prophetic mind. It creeps into the corridors of the Ummah in order to refute it properly, like the great Imam al-Muhasabi rahimahullah Ta'ala. From the position of Ahmed ibn Hanbal and those type, we don't touch any of that stuff. So that's a position, but it's a position that likes of al-Muhasabi. No, we've got to learn that in order to know how to deal with it effectively. And so that be the intention, marhaba, but you've got to be upon the line of Muhasabi. And that day we say, well, what's ultimately the line of Muhasabi? Whilst deen, ilm, whilst deen, theology, deen, spirituality. Imam Muhasabi, Hadith al-Muhasabi of the great Imam, and mashallah ta'ala, the Salaf in terms of spirituality. You with it? Because it's spirits that are coming for you. You're learning codes to open door for the emergence of the spirits, yeah. Right there. And it's as good as abracadabra. It's as good as AI and rubbing the lamp. I am the genie of the lamp. What is your commando, master? It's as good as that. That's how you're speaking to it, isn't it? Oh, Siri. What's that? What's the Amazon one called? What's it called? Alexa. Like, who are you speaking to? Are you speaking? And you like think about who are you speaking to? You ready? Like the human being, more intelligent, this rational animal, to speak to something that doesn't really exist. You are speaking to somebody, something. Yeah. You're speaking to Alexa. Hello, what do you want today? Any questions, Ewa?
So how do we get access to things like the black camel show in this company?
Hello, Amazon. Alexa. Hello, yeah, I don't know. And you go to the deserts of Mauritania, the textile's there, it's there. That's what they make tents out of. Okay? But that hadith also to demonstrate, quote unquote, that how we made mention before, the indifference that Rasul has. He has an indifference to clothes. You get the point? It's not about it being expensive. It's not about it being cheap. It's not about it being any fine, subtle upon the skin. It's not about it being coarse upon the skin. It's an indifference. Pays no attention to it. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay? Well, otherwise, nobody would wear a camel hair garment. Because that's what the hadith is trying to demonstrate. But the Rasul himself wore it. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala? Any questions? Huh? But the base of you see is the eye of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Imam Mursa Zabidi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned inside his commentary on the Ihya ul-Din of al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, what he calls a sayaran al-haya fi kulli shay. That is a life force, a life spirit that runs through the entire edifice of the creation of Allah ta'ala. The name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-Muhyi, the one who gives life. He's given life to everything. Everything's living. It's just, when we say something is human, sentient, we say something is animal, there's a lesser degree of life, or something is plant, lesser degree of life, or something is inanimate, like has no life whatsoever. The fault is in the eye, not in the smallness of the star. That's a flaw of the human eye there. And the eye of the Prophet has no flaw. He sees everything living. Like the tradition there of saying Aisha, when she drops a plate and the plate breaks, and the Prophet said, it's just died. And he means it's just died. And the life was, just like it has a life through the name al-Muhyi, it has a death through the name al-Mumit, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You understand? And so hakada we understand. You ready? So the Rasul side, to the face of it, it's a recognition that it's living. That's the facing the Prophet side of it, the recognition that it's living. And that is important because when everything is dead around us in terms of our perception, that day, as a rule, quote, opens up the door of ma'asiyah. That's one of the things you take from it, the door of ma'asiyah, of disobedience. Because you, as a rule, you're going to disobey in a context, quote, when there's no living reality. Or just living realities that are in cahoots with your disobedience. You with it? Like the sins that we do in private, as a person of higher religion, you ain't going to do that in public because of the observance of living reality. But now when your eye becomes more fine and you realize it's all living, you get the point? Then the haya, the modesty, quote, in front of Allah Ta'ala, likewise becomes alive and more living. Okay? And then thereby also, as you mentioned there, no doubt the Rasul is the one who sent ila al-alamina, to the world, sallallahu as a mercy, sallallahu he has a relation with everything. And that's what he lets us into his world. You know, like we mentioned with Muzayna here, when Muzayna come to Amal Wufud as a delegation, and they want to feel the seal, that's going to be, okay, he is the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or like the people of Kinda, Hadramaut, okay, then show what khabatna laka khabi'a. Okay, we've hid something from you. And we want to see remote viewing. Tell us what it is, where it is. So what there? Human beings can do that. Rasul is helping them out. The fact that I can do that is not going to prove what you want, that I'm a prophet. Okay, then what's going to prove that you're a prophet? They asked the Prophet, Rasul takes what? Stones. These will. Sure, his will. Then the Rasul removes the veil. Now you see the life of stones now. هكذا the stones begin to what? يعني يسبحنا Subhanallah, Subhanallah. هكذا. The tradition, their voices were like the sounds of frogs. يعني Subhanallah, Subhanallah. As Allah Ta'ala min shay, Allah Ta'ala says nothing except that it glorifies God. But la tafqa. But it's you who don't understand, you don't realize, you don't perceive the tasbih, Allah Ta'ala says. But everything does. So now you've gone into a world of living reality. You get the point? Like the living creates the living. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Rasul introduces into that. So long as it's living, now what about having a relationship with it? That's now giving it the name. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Hakada allama Adam al-asma'a kullaha. Teaching Adam the names of everything in its entirety. Those names gifted to the Prophet sallallahu rather, as we see in the age of the Prophet sallallahu, he's the namer. He's the one who gives the name, who apportions the name sallallahu to all these entities. Sallallahu. Now, many questions, inshallah ta'ala. No, definitely not. It's definitely not wrong to wear white, yani khalas, regularly. That's not what we're saying, but we're saying in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's not what he wears regularly. You get the point? It's not what he wears regularly, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nor his companions. Obviously, the companions in clear imitation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But for one to embrace white, mashallah ta'ala, as their clothing period, mashallah tabarakallah, got the hadith of the Rasul, khiyari libasikum min khiyari thiyabikum, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best of your clothing, mashallah ta'ala. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala? Say again. Could you? You want to call your child the cloud? That's what you call it. Allahu call your child the cloud, It's the cloud here. And when he goes to school, Allahu Yeah, remember the Prophet he teaches appropriateness. And what I mean appropriateness? That name Sahab is appropriate for the textile that's living. It's appropriate for the turban. You get the point? Like it's like somebody calling their child Azrael. You're gonna call your child Azrael, angel of death. Where's Azrael? Sure, you understand Azrael is appropriate for angels, but in particular those who guard over hell. You get the point? And that's important in the science of naming. Like, there's an appropriateness. Like human beings shouldn't adopt angelic names. In the same way, angels don't adopt human names. You get the point? Those upon the higher pyramid, human beings, don't adopt, quote unquote, the names upon those upon a more lower degree of the pyramid, like inanimate turbans. But likewise, turbans don't adopt the names upon those in a higher reality. And so the point being, names must have an appropriateness as well. And that's why there's a science to it. That's why ordinarily, as the child born, you give it to the imams, isn't it? And you name a child for me. You get the point? That day, like the name should come from folk. Yeah. That's why you look, if you see with the blessed birth that we celebrate tonight, the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, like it wasn't his grandfather, it wasn't his mother, it wasn't who named him. The name was deputed folk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Samihi Muhammad. Call him Muhammad. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. You got it? And so how can we seek an appropriateness? Yeah, appropriateness. Any questions, inshallah ta'ala? Did the Prophet tie his shirt with a belt? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. No. The Prophet tie his shirt with his belt. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now the Prophet did the Prophet have a belt? No, the Prophet had a belt. That has 3 circles inside of his belt. But that he tied his shirt with his belt, that's not what's said. It's not what's said at all.
Taking that tradition that you read that the female companion trembled with fear. What was the quality of the Rasul that made her tremble with fear?
Khushu'. Kal-mutakhashshi', هكذا she said. Kal-mutakhashshi'. Qayla bint Makhrama. It was the khushu' of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, the khushu', which is this fearful humility, is between Jamal and Jalal, and that there he's radiating it. That's part of the meaning of min al-faraq. Yeah, faraq means khawf. From fright you move into flight. Also, faraq is departure. It is something that is emanating from the Prophet ﷺ. And nafsu lil-nafsi tasri. The Imam rahimahullah ta'ala said, souls flow to souls. Yani. So the soul of the Nabi ﷺ is now emitting itself, and that's what grips, mashallah ta'ala, the great woman, anha warraha. I see with many companions, male and female, the presence of the Rasul ﷺ. I could be hayyin, hayyin, hayyin. The Rasul would say, be calm, be calm, be calm. He said, I'm just the son of a woman who used to make jerky, yani. Hadid, the Prophet ﷺ said, in humility, yani. How could it would be? But that's the state, khushu', khushu'.
Just on that point, does that mean that obviously you want to have a vision of the Rasul, but should you also fear having a vision of the Rasul?
No. I don't fear it. You'd rather be in fear of the vision than the absence of the vision. You get the point? You'd rather see him, and now you're filled with fear than the absence thereof, isn't it? Because the Rasul la yati illa bi khair. Prophet only comes with good, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay? Anyone have any questions, inshallah ta'ala? Any questions? Sisters, any questions? جزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.